because Adrianne, it got bad. Like I would wake up in the morning like, does your stomach hurt? Do you have a headache? Like I felt sick every day because I
Yeah.
didn't want to go to work.
Yeah.
And
I know that feeling.
yeah, and that's not a good feeling every single day. And we spend most of our time at work,
Yeah.
you know? And so then I was like, okay, Genia, we need to get a hold of our joy because girl, I turned into the negative friend. I always had something to complain about. I will go home and I'm complaining. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm that person now. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize that
Yeah.
until I just really stopped and I heard myself. But I was still listening to like Tony Robbins in the morning and Esther Hicks. Like I was still listening to that stuff. But you know what? It's interesting. It's a difference between when you listen to something and then when you are actioning
Mm-hmm.
either what you're listening to or whatever is going to help you. Like we can
Mm-hmm.
listen to stuff all day long, but if we're not actually doing something about it, there's not going to be a lot of shifts.
Hey, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and welcome to episode 150, 150 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. What we have in common can change the world. I'm very excited about my guest today. She is a longtime friend. She is a joy. And it's funny that I use that word because she is all about joy. She is a podcaster. She's a wellness expert. She's a coach. She's a strategist, actually, as well. Her name is Genia Hale, and she is known as Joyful Genia. She is known as the host of the podcast Create a Magical Day, and she is a joy expert. And, sometimes when we think about joy, we think, oh gosh, they're trying to project joy onto me and I don't feel joyful. Well, that is not what she does. What she is about is helping and encouraging people to tap into their passion. And her passion is joy. And I love having her in conversation today because she wasn't always joyful. She didn't always have the outlook that she has now. And she's a person that has constantly worked on herself and has been open to evolve. And it is just such a wonderful thing. I have to say also that I am a guest on her podcast as well. So I would love for you to check that out because between the two conversations, I find that they are so fruitful. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to speak to a lot of aspects of myself that, well, I should say in a different way than I do here on Let's Start Healing. But let me tell you a little bit about Genia. In her other life, outside of this brand, she is a strategist for a Fortune 500 company. She is known as a joy creator, and she offers workshops. She offers exercises. She has a newsletter that you would love. She offers joyful tips to help you nudge yourself or kick yourself out of the funk that you're in and tap into what really resonates for you. She's been featured in O Magazine. She's been featured in O Daily. And on her podcast, Create a Magical Day, she has interviewed thought leaders, best-selling authors, wellness experts, wellness coaches. She is such an all around, just wonderful person. And when we first met in 2009, I want to say it was, I just saw what was so remarkable in Genia right away. I knew that she was going to be someone powerful for a national platform. So I know that you will see this in her too. I'm really, really excited about our conversation. Uh, I don't even want to give you all the details, but I want to say that uh, she has found a way to be free within her authentic self. And I think that that is what so many of us strive for, want. And when we're blessed and after doing work, some people are born that way naturally, but some of us, I know let me speak for myself. It's something that I have had to work on to be free within myself. And the only way I could be free within myself was to be myself. And that is what Genia learned and about herself. And she shares some of that journey with us, among other things. I want to share something else that I think is powerful and resonates for this conversation. She will share how she grew up in a very structured religion and how now she's uh, just evolved where she incorporates a lot of truth and love from other faiths and spiritual practices into her overall faith. And the reason that I wanted to mention that is because I grew up Catholic and I'm a person that I just always believe God is love, period. And Catholicism raises the idea of sin and guilt and mystery and different things like that. And I just believed in what Jesus teaches in the Bible. And I just believed and believe in the love that rises up out of the New Testament and the Old Testament. And so my road and my journey with God and my journey to know God has become so expansive. And one of the core teaching of my spiritual faith is A Course in Miracles, which I started a recent podcast called Inside A Course in Miracles. And I'm bringing this up because on the road of my spiritual journey, I would meet people, men, I would date men, and some of them came from a more structured background, and they would reject me once I said some of what my beliefs are, which is God is only love, period. That is my belief. And so that would hurt me when a relationship would break up over that. And I remember a relationship broke up over that, someone that I was really beginning to fall in love with. This was some years ago. And it was hard. And then when I was coming out of it, I had moved on, gotten on down the road, and I had a first date with someone. And we were out at a restaurant bar, and the two things that I was worried he was going to ask me about was my faith and do I cook? Those were the two things that I get sensitive around because I knew men had expectations around those two things because I don't really cook. So that is exactly what this person asked me. He asked me about my faith. I think he asked me if I go to church, or he asked me something where he wanted to get to the crux of my faith. And he asked me if I cook. And when he asked me, I was like, I'll be right back. And especially about the faith part. And I went to the ladies' room and I just put my head in my hands. And I just needed to take a deep breath in private before I went back and I shared my spirituality. And so I did. And I also mentioned that I don't cook. And he said that that was, fine. And, he came with me to my spiritual discussion group that I was going to every Sunday. This was every Sunday for years before the pandemic. And I thought I was good, but it turned out that he thought I was a heathen. I kid you not. He doesn't think that now, but he thought I was a heathen. He thought, there was something wrong because I believe that God is love and only love. And uh, so I'm saying this to say that this worry, this concern, began to subside because I started meeting people where this was not an issue. But recently, about a week ago, I met someone over the phone who was interested. I was interested in their services to help me around my brand. I was interested in their services. And this person didn't want to work with me because that this person works only with Christian based organizations. And I believe in Jesus. I believe in Jesus wholeheartedly, that Jesus, all that he is and all that Jesus is about, we have that ability too. We have that ability to uh, uh, have such conviction that we know Jesus had. We have the ability for forgiveness. We have the ability for faith and belief that God will answer all of our prayers. Uh, just, I believe in all of these things about Jesus, but not structured religion. I don't fall under the idea of a Christian for traditional Christians. So this person did not want to work with me. And it just was a such a it took me back. It didn't take me back to hurt and pain. It just took me back to reflection. I find it something that some of us collectively reject the idea that God can be only love. I can see if that's not how a person was brought up and that wasn't what they were taught, and it might be something that doesn't sit with them in terms of, a belief, that God is only love, because some people believe that God is wrath as well as love. What I'm saying is, what is interesting to me sometimes is how the idea that God could be only love for someone who believes that he's wrath and love, or someone who believes they have to fear God. Okay, someone believes that. But the idea that he could be only love, it's interesting to me that that is rejected by some people. Not that a person has to get on board with that thought, but isn't that what you would want, if you knew that that could be true? Isn't that what you would want to be true? To know that God loves you no matter what you do, no matter what you think, no matter what horrific act you might carry out, God loves you. Wouldn't you want to know that if you could know that? Just a question. Just a question. I'll tell you though, it's something that I know is that God is only love. And there's nothing greater than God. And there's no reason for God to be the way that we are. There's no reason for God to have an ego the way we have an ego. There's no reason for that, because love conquers all. And I think that we don't even know or can comprehend the magnitude of the power of the love of God. Well, I've said my piece before my conversation with joyful Genia. I want to invite you and ask you to comment in the episode where you listen. Let me know what you think of this episode. Let me know what you think of the podcast overall. Comment for me. Send me an email at let's start healing podcast at gmail.com. You can also reach me on social media at let's start healing podcast or at Adrianne Marie 19. Like the episode, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and please share Let's Start Healing with at least one person that you know. So let's get to it. Let's meet Genia and let's start healing. Welcome, Genia.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here on the podcast. Oh my gosh.
Yes, and you've been on before with
I
your mom, but
know.
this is a solo, and I'm just loving it, and love the earrings.
Oh, thank you. Well, my skirt has some blue in it, so I was pulling out all the
Oh,
colors.
yeah, yeah, and I saw you on Instagram, or was it Facebook when you were, you were gonna fry or boil lemons?
Oh, well, on both. So yeah, so I just posted in my stories where I was like, I cut up some lemon, I put some cinnamon and poured water, and I just let it simmer like while I was working last night, and then I turned it off. And then this morning I did it again, and oh my gosh, it created the most beautiful smell. Like it was
Really?
like a lemon cinnamony
Yeah.
smell throughout the house. Like when I walked upstairs, I could smell it. Oh my gosh, in my room, it was so nice.
Oh my, so you had a pot of
Mhm.
boiling water that you had lemons and cinnamon in,
Yep, that was it.
and you just let that happen for, like, maybe 15, 20 minutes
Oh, I
last
probably let
night,
that
and then
boil for like an hour, and then I would refill it
Oh,
with water when the water started evaporating, and then I did it again today. I did it for probably like 3 hours today.
what a great idea.
Well, I was reading the book, The Artist Way, and it really encourages you to be more creative and having the small micro creative activities, like how I talk about bite-sized joy.
Yeah,
And one of the things I think it on the one of the challenges, it was like, maybe create a lovely scent in your home. And it was like, cook something, bake some cookies, I don't know, something. And then that's what popped into my head. Typically, people like in the fall will do like oranges and cinnamon, but I didn't
yeah.
have any oranges. So I was like, I have some lemon. So we're going to see how this turns out.
Well, so gosh, I was gonna start one way, but now Imma start a different way.
Let's do it.
So your podcast is Create a Magical Day, and you're joyful Genia,
Yes.
and, just talk about the podcast and your inspiration, and you seem like you were always joyful, but then just in conversation, I feel like you weren't always joyful, and you
Yeah.
chose
So
you chose joy.
absolutely. So I can start by saying when I was younger, back in 1983. No. So I grew up with Bible verses and quotes between my parents. Like my dad, big in the Bible, he would always, read verses, and then he had just like quotes. And then my mom, she always has quotes, her jazzisms. So I grew up with that. And when I was in high school, my dad bought me a pocket Bible slash inspiration book. So it had different topics in there, like maybe one could be on sadness, or one could be on happiness, or one could be on confusion. It didn't matter. There's all these different topics, and it was for high schoolers. So it had Bible verses in it, and it had quotes in there. And I would go around and I'd ask my friends, "What kind of day are you having? Is there a word that I could look up for you so I can read from this book?"
Yeah.
And I remember one day when I was in high school, my English teacher came up to me and she was like, "Jania, so and so is having a really hard day. You think you can read something from your book for her?" And I was like, heck yeah. Like I remember that day. And so I grew up like that. I will say that I grew up in with positivity. Now, as I got older, because I grew up in so much positivity, I don't think I knew how to process negativity. And so I remember I used to say, I don't have what did I say? I don't have bad moments. I either have neutral or good. Not realizing later on we call that toxic positivity.
Mm.
Like I didn't know how to talk to people about any challenges that I was having, so I suppressed them. Why? Because every time I would go to someone, they would end up crying. I'm like, "Wait, but this is my problem."
Yeah. Oh, they were empaths, and they were feeling
Yeah,
what
but
was
I
going on
wasn't
with
even
you, or
yeah,
they were
but it was
making their problem your problem.
yeah, it was almost like that because when I was talking to them, I wasn't filled with emotion. I didn't really connect with deep emotion just then. Because when you're positive, you're just positive, right? And so, but I knew like, okay, but this doesn't really feel that positive, even though I'm going to be positive. So when I talk about it, I still talked about it in a positive way.
Yeah.
But for them, they're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, which it was terrible. but I ended up having to console people when I was going through things. Like even when my dad died, girl, I got so many messages where people are like, "Oh my God, I'm so sad." I'm like, yeah, me too. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm like, you don't know what you're gonna do. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And so, but that's what happens when you're a strong person. But anyway,
Right.
so I grew up like that, very positive. And then there were moments in my life where I was like, oh, I'm not feeling this positivity anymore. Like I'm
Yeah.
actually feeling sad. I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling like I don't know who like I want to talk to, or who I can
Mhm.
talk to. And so I figured out, I don't even remember all the things that I did to get through that. But
Mhm.
to fast forward when Create a Magical Day became something was I worked in a toxic work environment, super toxic. My manager and I did not get along. Now we cool, but we did not get along, and it's because he had a lot of healing to do too. And
Right.
he like, he'll speak about that. And so we just did not align. And I'm a very sensitive person, like super sensitive. Like
You're Libra, right?
yes,
I'm a
yes.
rising Libra, so I get it.
Okay. And your girl will cry. Like if I ask you to do something and you have like an attitude, I'm like, I just asked you to do it. Like my feelings just be hurt. So, but mom taught me something, and that was what you run from, you run with. And I did not want to leave the toxic work environment and bring toxicity with me to the next place. Because at first I started looking for another job because Adrienne, it got bad. Like I would wake up in the morning like, does your stomach hurt? Do you have a headache? Like I felt sick every day because I
Yeah.
didn't want to go to work.
Yeah.
And
I know that feeling.
yeah, and that's not a good feeling every single day. And we spend most of our time at work,
Yep.
you know? And so then I was like, okay, Genia, we need to get a hold of our joy because girl, I turned into the negative friend. I always had something to complain about. I will go home and I'm complaining. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm that person now. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize that
Yeah.
until I just really stopped and I heard myself. But I was still listening to like Tony Robbins in the morning and Esther Hicks. Like I was still listening to that stuff. But you know what? It's interesting. It's a difference between when you listen to something and then when you are actioning
Mhm.
either what you're listening to or whatever is going to help you. Like we can
Mhm.
listen to stuff all day long, but if we're not actually doing something about it, there's not going to be a lot of shifts.
Yeah.
So I started like taking midday tea breaks. Because I wrote down like what are some small things I could do to bring me joy at work, not
Right.
enjoying the environment, right? Then I would close my door and have a little midday dance party. I started drawing in the morning, like what I mean, I draw stick figures. What I wanted my like to feel like in the day, and I would write like affirmations around that.
Mhm.
I started
Mhm.
writing gratitude notes to my coworkers, even my manager, and it wasn't like a fluffy gratitude note. There were areas where I was thankful. And so that's what I focused on. And all of that. Oh, and I changed, like I would dress in, I mean, I already dress in bright colors, but extra bright colors. So when I would see myself in the mirror, I'd be like, hey, girl, you cute. Like I had to do things to boost myself. And
Yeah.
it changed the environment for me because of my
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah. And,
And
your
so
energy shifted the environment, period. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
so things started to change. So anyway, I realized I was like, I'm not alone in this struggle because I wasn't the only one. Like I would talk to my friends, like whether it was things that were going on at work or at home. And so then that's when it was like, I won't say the podcast was the first thing that came to mind, right? But it was like, people probably need tips on how do they infuse the joy while you're still processing all the other stuff that's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to stop the laundry. We're not going to stop, the cooking or the work that maybe, that's labor intensive, or
Yeah.
maybe there's somebody that kind of bothers us. We may not be able to stop all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
like, how can we evoke more goodness throughout our day? So that's why I like to
Mhm.
say every day may not be filled with joy, but we can create joyful moments every day. And I think that's the key, is tapping into the moments.
Mhm, mhm. And, so I was on your podcast
Yes.
and you said something that is 1,000% true. And I know this, but it was still so powerful. And you said joy is your birthright. And that
Absolutely.
is so true. And, I think most people don't walk around understanding that joy is our birthright,
Right.
period. Yeah.
I
And we
and I
just,
I I think that because of life's circumstances, that sometimes people have a hard time reaching for joy or feeling like they even deserve it. I'll give you an example. Like, think about when someone passes away. Obviously, you have grief. And sometimes people feel bad when they start moving through that grief and they're not as sad because it's like, if I'm not as sad anymore, does that mean that I don't miss my loved one? Does that mean that I didn't care?
yeah. And also, I mean, in my world, when somebody passes away, like a family member, the time between, like, let's say people get together, for the funeral and the wake and staying up all night and talking, those are some of the most memorable laugh-filled times.
Yeah.
Even the repast, in my world, it's been a lot of laughter,
That's
even when
awesome.
it's been heartbreaking losses. So, yeah, yeah,
And so, like, we process things differently in, like, in our life, but some people, like, it's like, "Oh, I'm too busy for joy," right? Or I have too much
yeah,
stuff going
yes,
on. So I think, you know what, when we were on the podcast and you were talking about, you really resonate with peace.
mhm,
That could be joy, right? Like,
right,
joy
it
is a
is,
feeling of happiness and pleasure. So if peace is bringing you happiness and pleasure, then that's your joy. I always say, whatever your word is, I know I use the word joy. Whatever your word is, that's for you. And you get to decide how that shows up in your life. But we have to consciously make an effort. Like the human brain, like, we are naturally wired for negativity. And the
yeah,
higher your cortisol levels are,
mhm,
the higher there is a connection between the negativity that we process.
yeah, and the world feeds on negativity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Videos go
yeah,
viral when we're talking about craziness. And then
yeah.
you talk about some happiness. It's like, oh, okay, there's a little light.
And you talk to your guests about what their thing is, right? You talk to them about what brings them uh joy and happiness, and that can look different for everybody, like you were just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have everyday people. I mean, I do have like authors and yoga instructors and whatnot on there, people who have different practices. I like for everyone to be featured on the podcast, all types of people, because, like you said, joy shows up differently. That's why I tell people I have suggestions. I like to provide a framework, right? Is choose a time in your day. Here's some activities, but do you have your own activities? My main thing is realizing it's your birthright and prioritizing it.
Mhm.
And I will just give you some suggestions around that. And yes, I share tips, but it's going to look different for everyone,
Yeah.
depending on where you are in your life. And I mean, and what you like and what you don't like.
Right, right, right. And so something I really want to talk to you about is laughter, because we touched on it a little bit at the end. I think we might have stopped recording. And so laughter for me is like everything. And I don't my best friend, we've been friends since I was 9 and she was 10.
Oh my gosh, that's so
She's a year
cute.
older. Yeah. And I don't know if I would have a sense of humor if I had never met her. But we just would laugh, like we spend the night over each other's house, and we would crack up all night long, our whole lives. We just laugh and laugh and laugh. And I tell her all the time, like, I really don't know. Like, I have a real big sense of humor. I mean, I laugh just in my own thoughts.
Oh,
You
God.
know, so and so, would you talk about laughter for you? And because you said you made a comment to me about how you didn't always laugh, and that, something might be funny at a comedy show and you might just not. Like, that's funny. I
Yeah,
just can't imagine that.
Adrian, it's crazy. Like, when I reflect on that, like, I can laugh about it now. But yeah, there was this time in my life, it was in 2010. And I don't know when it started, but I just remember when I was driving home one day, I was like, dang, Genia, you act like you have another life to live after this. Like, this is your serious, go hard. And then we can laugh and have fun afterwards, right? The next life. And it's not like I didn't have fun, but it was like I was not connecting to things that were funny. Someone would tell a joke and I'd be like, like I would like process the joke. Or like you said, I go to a comedy show and this is what I would say. I'd say, oh my gosh, that is so funny. I would not connect. I could watch a funny movie and I would literally say, that is so funny. There would be like no laughter that would come out. And that's why when I did my first vision book, I focused on the first month. Let me tell you. So the first week, I looked up jokes. The next week, I told jokes. I was a funny friend for a minute. I need to go back to that so I can be funny again. Uh, and then the third week, I watched like I think funny shows and dang, I can't remember the fourth one, but every week I added on to that. And it really helped me connect with laughter. I actually have a podcast on that where I am talking about the joy and laughter because there's so much science too. Like for people who need science-based things, right? There's also a
Yeah.
lot of science connected to laughter and our dopamine. Because,
Yeah.
even as we get older, our dopamine decreases and our cortisol increases.
Yeah.
And so we have to
Interesting.
have practices in place.
Yeah.
So then, we're
So
able to
interesting.
manage all of that. And that's not
Yeah.
a scare tactic, right? But that is just like, it's so true that there's science behind the things that we do. And laughter gives you those good vibes. You feel it in
Yes.
your body.
Yes, and there's 2 things I wanna say. Like, it's so interesting that you said that because I'm an old movie buff, and so I have, like, 1,000 plus movies recorded, right? And so I might see somebody like Cary Grant from when he was just coming on the scene to, he's 40 or 50, years old. So you see a difference in bodies, in their
Mm,
makeup. Not just him, but he's a good example. And I noticed how when people get older, at least on screen, they become more stiff. They don't move in the same way.
true.
And so, and I don't mean because of any like physical issue. It's something that I've always been curious about. And I wonder if it relates to that. Because it
I
could even
wonder.
be a comedic actor, when you said that it drops, like our dopamine drops. And I wonder if it relates to that.
Yeah, no, that would be really
Yeah.
interesting to see. Because yeah, there's a lot of neuroscience around that. There's a
Yeah.
lot of neuroscience around mindfulness, right? And I think
Right.
that like laughter is a piece of that. Laughter,
Mhm.
I feel like unless you have a disconnect, and there's something I cannot remember what it's called, but sometimes people experience something where they can't laugh. They cannot connect to the feelings that they know that they've experienced before. I'd have to look
Mm.
it up, but I
Yeah.
actually coached someone before on that. I did some joy coaching sessions and we were
Yeah.
talking about that. Like now they've been able to move past that, but it's a condition where you're supposed to laugh, you're supposed to feel good, but you just can't
Yeah.
connect to it.
Wow. Wow.
So
And
to what you're
I
saying, it's showing up in the body later on. I don't know if that could be
yeah.
the case, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so something. I like to what I've noticed because I look at people, I like looking at people, and I notice this connects to joy, just how their whole face changes
Mhm.
when they start laughing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's the real part of them. That's who they really are.
Like
You
that
know?
childlike self,
Yes.
that
That,
innocence. I think
yeah.
laughter brings about an innocence in us, like when we were children.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I agree. So before I want to go into spiritual questions, I want you to share about your hair and how you decided to shave your head. It was the most inspiring thing. And it had to just be so freeing. And just, would you talk about that? By the way, your hair is very pretty right now.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Oh, I don't have a fresh cut, so I look like Grandpa Cletus under here right now. Uh, no, but so I started having like hair issues, oh gosh, several years ago, where it just won't grow everywhere. Like alopecia runs on my dad's side of the family. And then like I've always had like blood issues that also prevents like the stimulation of hair follicles and whatnot. I've been all kind of doctors and whatnot. So I'm sure if I invested all the thousands of dollars, right, maybe I get some hair to grow. It wasn't that serious. So I can't remember when. It's some point I started wearing wigs, right? Because I noticed like, oh crap, like I'm seriously balding in some areas. I try to do the little ponytails, but you can still see a little bald spot in pictures. I was like, oh no. So I was so embarrassed though about my hair. And I always wore the same wig. And the only time it would change is if I got it in a darker color. So it'd be like, oh, I just colored my hair. I remember I had this one girl, it was this white girl. She was like, oh my God, Genia, your hair is so blonde. I'm so jealous. Like, how do you get that blonde? And I was like, girl, I just got a good beautician. Like, I don't know, whatever. And so fast forward to the shaving. We are now in 2020. We on lockdown. Now, mind you, let me back up just a little bit. I wasn't wearing a wig, but I was wearing like half of my head was shaved, and then my best friend crocheted the rest. So I had like these curly little,
Yeah.
crocheted hair, and then my head was shaved on the side. Well, when during COVID and we weren't going anywhere, she lives in Houston. I live in Austin, which is a couple hours away. I was like, what am I going to do about my hair? And so I try to put wraps around it. You can't really wear a wig when you got a bunch of hair on one side and no hair on the other. Like it's just lopsided.
Mhm.
So I was like, and one day I went out and I rode my bike and I just had this talk with myself. And it was a liberating talk. And I was like, Genia, you are allowing your joy to be defined by your hair. Like you are preventing yourself from this freedom and it's taking away from your joy. What if you just shaved it and you were okay with either rocking it bald, rocking a wig, rocking a wrap, like basically being versatile versus hiding? This wig now, it's a form of versatility. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I wear my pink one, sometimes I wear my rainbow, sometimes I'll wear it if it has to be freshly shaved. I'll wear
Uh-huh.
it shaved, with some earrings and some makeup. Otherwise, I look like Jazz's son. Um,
Or sometimes you wear a baseball cap, which looks really, really great.
right. But I gave myself the permission to be okay with that and not be defined by not having the hair. And that's what it was. So when I went on Facebook Live, so let me tell you, Donnie wasn't actually supposed to shave it on the live.
Oh.
What I was doing was I was just telling people like, hey, this is something I'm going to do. I want to shave my head. Why? Because I realized that it is keeping me from living like my full joy because of the shame behind it. And I encourage you to explore areas where you have shame. Now, I'm not saying if you wear a good wig or weave, you got to shave your head. I just want you to explore where you have shame and where can you release the shame. And so what was supposed to happen was he was gonna turn it on and I was gonna be like, all right, see you on the other side, and then turn the
Oh.
video off. But it was like so I was like,
Oh.
well, we just gonna go with it. And so he shaved my head live and I just kind of kept talking through it. And you're right, it was very liberating. And that's why I can show up and you see my social media.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
I have hair and sometimes I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're very creative. It's a perfect name for your podcast,
Thank
Create a
you.
Magical Day. And everything about you is all aligned. You're very
Thank you.
colorful, you're very creative, you're very mindful, deep, intuitive. All of it is just all connected.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
received that. I appreciate you seeing that in me.
Yeah. And so with spirituality, I'm wondering, like, do you see like your higher self? I hope this makes sense to you, like your higher self connecting with your self now, because sometimes you'll say, well, Genia, what are you doing? And, like, so, and that makes me think of like your higher self, like you're seeing yourself from a higher place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I see myself like from so many different levels, on so many different levels that it's funny because I'll talk to my therapist and she understands that I'm very woo woo. And so I love that she accepts that about me. So when I come to her and I say, I just don't feel like I'm living my life. Like I'm in a different dimension. Like I'm not supposed to be in this one, right? Like she's in a like, oh, she's a little crazy, like, or she doesn't say you're being disassociative. Like she doesn't, it's like because she realizes how deeply connected I am to my spirituality. And I realize I live on this plane and how they connect. And so then she asks me questions that explores that. But like, yes, like, girl, let me tell you, I have these moments where I it's like I have an outer body experience, especially mirror talk. Ooh, there is something to mirror talk. And I
Yes.
try to do that often. I mean, you have mirrors everywhere, and I'll walk by and I'll say, "Hey girl, hey, how you doing?" you know, or I'll say, and that's a really good question to ask myself in the mirror because there is something about looking at myself in my eyes when I ask that question versus I'm just walking around and like, oh, how we doing? Like, no,
Yeah,
when
it's
I look,
different.
and that allows me to really tap into me and where I am. And then also just whatever else that I'm doing where I'm just like looking at my life. Gratitude also, that's something that helps me connect to my spirituality as well as who I am and where I am because it takes
Mhm.
me outside of it allows me to be present and takes me outside of like all of the thoughts that are going through my head and then I could really see myself.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, and you did a do you still do, like, a silent retreat at your home sometimes?
I have not. I know what you're referencing. I have not done that since then. Um, that was
That
such
was
a
like
beautiful experience. That is
yeah.
actually something that I could see doing again. Gosh, I just feel like my life is so busy, but I could definitely take some moments for that. That was so amazing, so empowering. Like I spent the entire weekend in silence, no social media, no nothing from like Friday when I got off of work till Monday when I woke up. And I'll tell you what was really helpful that I've been able to carry over. He was my father-in-law at the time, which I still call him dad. But he was like, Genia, when you find that your mind starts racing, because that's what happens when we're in silence. That's why people have a hard time like meditating, right? Because our
Mhm,
mind
mhm.
starts racing. He said, I want you to think of one word that grounds you. And so my word was grace. And so when I find myself on like a downward spiral, instead of saying, okay, Genia, stop, let's not do this, let's process this, da, 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 da,
Mhm.
all I have to say is grace. And it reminds me to just be
Yes,
still.
yes. That's awesome, and so you did that from a Friday to Sunday night?
To like a Monday when I woke up the next day.
Wow, and so did you read, or what did you do during that time? You just meditated, or you what did you do?
Yeah, so what I did was I worked with he gave me some tips and and my old therapist at the time, she had been on silent retreats. So she helped me map out a plan. And so what I did was I wrote out a few different types of meditations or like body scans to do during that time. It was also during Ramadan. And so I had my prayers that were built. So it was like so perfect.
Yeah.
So I had my prayers built in, and then I did like all these really neat like body meditations. I would like sit and just sit outside. What was interesting is I wouldn't sit outside and daydream because again, our mind starts to wander and then we're not being present. I would
Mhm.
look at the squirrels and actually listen to the sound they make. It was the first time I realized the sound they make. I would try to reenact it, but it might sound crazy. Uh, I would look at the trees and the details on the tree. I was
Yeah.
looking at the blades of grass. There were moments where I would just like wrap myself in a blanket and maybe take a nap. But I was, this one was, oh my gosh, wild. It was the slowest walk in life around my house. And when I say it was wild,
I
because
remember
we're
you
people, we just
saying that.
go, go, go. Girl, it was like, there's a step. There's a step. Like, and I am slowly walking around the house and I'm being mindful of every step, not allowing my mind to just wander.
Mhm.
I mean, incredible. Now, was it challenging? Heck yeah. Now, what I didn't have anything like crazy that came up. Sometimes people might have like breakdowns because you are in all that silence and you can be in your head. I didn't have that experience. But the silence and the art of non-doing, that was kind of hard because we're kind of wired to just go.
And did you have was your dog with you at that time? I
Mm-mm.
was just wondering if you walked your dog.
Nope. I was
Okay.
completely by myself. The only thing that happened was Jamaica came in town that weekend, but I told him that I was doing that. So it was just like a wave one day when he
Yeah.
came in, and that was just it. And I was like, I'm focused on this. I was like, you can go upstairs, do whatever. I was like, but I'm not having any interaction.
Mhm. Wow. And so when I learned when we started before we started recording that you have generally a word for each day. And how did that come about? And was it just a way, did you say it's just a way that you wanted to center yourself for each day?
Yeah, well, my mom talks a lot about her trans formula is clear intention plus focused attention equals divine retention. And so that's really how I plan my day is what is my intention? How do I want to feel for the day? So my word is based on how I want to feel. So I may say like today I want to feel feminine and whimsical. So that means that everything I do, conversations I have, I'm tapping into my femininity. As I'm answering emails or reading, it's like a feminine energy, right? So if I'm feeling hard that during that day, I'm like, well, I don't think this was my intention, right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, let's go back to that. And so it honestly, it's just like I decide how I want to feel, and then I look for moments to
Yeah.
practice that. And it helps me to identify if I'm in alignment with how I want to feel and what I want throughout my day. And that's how I have, quote, control of my day. Is
Yeah.
I control how I feel. I can't control all the circumstances. Like, let's say that I want a day that's peaceful, right? And all this last minute stuff keeps coming up. That's not very peaceful. But how I approach it, because my intention is peaceful, then I get to say, oh, okay, let me process this for a minute and then let me
Mhm.
react. Versus like, oh God, let me kick things.
Yeah.
So that's why
Yeah.
I like to come up with the word.
And what I find is if I'm really connected, like what really helps me and connects me is one of your mom's breath meditations with Kevco. And there's
Yeah.
this one in particular that I really like. And I find that things kind of slide off me,
Is it the
like
sun cloud
I don't,
meditation or no?
it's no,
Not the sun cloud. Oh, okay.
it's the chakra meditation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Breath and through the chakras. And but I find that I'm not as affected by something, that I don't want that might happen or the way somebody might come at me or something. Like I'm not as affected. I'm kind of more like observant or like, okay, just it's what it is.
Yeah, and I think that like having that, intention on how you want to feel or going through that meditation that helps to evoke a
Yeah.
feeling is that's what can help you like move through the situations that
Mhm.
maybe you don't have control over. You don't like, to be honest, we don't have control over a lot of our situations, especially
Right.
that have to do with other people. If you're
Yeah.
driving in the car and you want to have a peaceful drive to go meet a friend, you can't help if somebody cuts you off or not. What you
Mhm.
can help is how you respond. Let's say you're watching a movie and all of a sudden the power goes out in your neighborhood. You may not be able to help that, but you can react on like how you respond and how your evening changes. So that's what I mean. And I'm not saying that that's always easy because it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is. It
So
is not. It's a practice, though.
right. Right. And the thing about you now, I know you shared like how, what your influences were, with your parents and everything. And there's still something innate in you, which I relate
Yeah.
to, is, like you're going to push through and try to work on, different things within yourself.
Oh,
Um, you know,
absolutely.
yeah,
Like I was talking to my manager. I have a new manager coach, and I was talking to her today because we're working through like some blocks that I have. And actually, the first time we met, I told her, I said, look, I love homework. I was like, I love to grow. And even though I realize there are areas where I may have blocks, the reason why I am here is because I'm having a challenge moving through them, even though I know that I have them. So
Mhm.
I want help through that. I'm a
Yeah,
very aware person, but just because we're aware doesn't mean that when tools are available, they're always easy for us to use. They're not.
That used to be so hard for me. I used
Mhm.
to feel like, "Okay, so I'm aware. That's not helping me."
It's like that's
Yes,
the first step, awareness. You're like,
right.
then what?
Yeah,
Because you know what's
yeah,
funny? Like, I've had to tell people like that I've worked with, like therapists, even though I'm very aware, I'm very mindful, I'm talking to you about this because I'm having an issue with it. So I need your help because right now I'm not in the state to help myself.
right,
And I think
right,
people have to learn to be kind of okay with that.
mhm,
Like, where do you need support and being okay with asking for that to get to where
mhm,
you want to go?
mhm. Yeah, like, can you just let it be what it is?
Yeah, and it's
'Cause
okay
that
to have
does
the
help you to
feeling,
let it go.
right?
Yeah,
Like, I'm like, "This sucks." Like, even though, like, yes, I wanna have a perception like, "Oh, like, how do I work through this?" I still am not gonna deny the fact that I don't like it. And
mhm,
I think that there is, like, a nice alignment that can happen in our lives around that. Like, you can not like something, something can bother you, and you can still approach it in a manner that is light that you can work through.
yeah, because otherwise it's resistance, and that's
Yes.
just not gonna
And that's
help anything.
strong energy.
Yeah, that's not gonna help.
Mhm.
So, so let's talk about your spirituality
Yeah,
and what so what is your do you call I call God for me is that entity, that divine entity, is that the word for you? Is it higher power? Is it the universe? What
it's
is your
everything.
yeah.
It honestly, it depends on how I'm feeling and who I'm talking to, but it is all those. I had to learn to get there, though, because I felt like calling God anything outside of God is like blasphemy, but that's also because I grew up very religious, and now I am one with everything. So I've shifted a lot.
Yeah. And so how would you describe that relationship?
Oh, it's like whimsical and it flows, and wherever I am, I get what I need and I give back. Like
Mhm,
before, like to describe that is I grew up in the church, which I'm very thankful for because that's what gave me the foundation. There was some rigidity in that for me, and I remember there always being this pull, but it felt heavy. And I was
mhm,
like, I don't feel like this is how I want to feel connected. I won't say it's not what God is. That's not how I want to feel connected. I want to connect with God because there is one, there is a connection, right?
mhm.
Not because I have to. And that took a while for me to release that. And
Yeah.
now I'm at a place to where I'm like, I find my connection in God in so many places. Like it's been probably about 14 years, I think, since I've honored Ramadan. And that came about because I had some friends who were Muslim and I was like, "Oh, tell me what you're doing." And they told me I was like, "Oh, that's dope." And so then I was like, "Well, I want to honor you in that." And so I learned like I'm aligned with that and that's something that's part of my practice every year, like I love Ganesha. Oh my gosh, the elephant god, like it's Hinduism, like we be connecting, right? Like that's one
Yeah,
of my
yeah,
favorites. Like sometimes I'll say, in the name of Jesus, Allah, Mary, Joseph, and Ganesh.
I love it. I love that.
So yeah, so I've just learned like if there is like a religious holiday, I'm like, oh, tell me more. Like my thing is whatever connects me to a higher power, that's what I want to be involved in. And I love it. Oh, remember the Open Mind Center? Is
Yes.
that still a thing?
Yes, it's still around. It's not in the same location. It's
Okay.
spiritual bookstore for people who don't know.
Oh my gosh. That opened my world so much. Like at first, oh
Really?
my gosh. Yeah. So prior to like me being more open about spirituality, my mom gave me the book Four Agreements. And that's when I lived in Atlanta.
Yes.
And the first time I read it, I was like, because my mom gave it to me. I was judging her on how she implemented the book. But I've read it many times since. And then I remember at the Open Mind Center, someone, I think I could see her. Was her name Robin or Kim? She was a brown skinned lady and she had some little dreads. Anyway,
Oh,
you know what I'm talking
Kim.
about?
That's
Kim?
Kim. She had like a radical forgiveness.
That's what I was gonna say. That's the
Yeah,
first time I heard about radical forgiveness. So then I
yeah.
had like those tools. And then I had the 4 agreements. And then I remember there always being like speakers that were coming. And then I read this book about the indigo child that I picked up from there.
Mm.
And that's when I learned about protection. Then when I got home, I attended this. Oh my gosh, it was so neat. It was a 13-month program called 13 Moons. And it
Mm.
was facilitated by Heather Ashamara, and she studied with Don Miguel. And I was introduced to so many different spiritual practices that it took me out my comfort zone. Girl, we was even talking about witches. I was like, wait a minute. Jesus does not approve, but no, I opened my mind up to learn
Yes.
like all the preconceived notions that I had. Like that's
Yes.
not what it was. So
Yeah.
I just started opening myself up to more, and it just really has increased the depth of my spiritual relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, there was a energy healer there, and I was thinking about her recently. I want to say her name was something like Yuli or something like
Mm,
that,
okay.
and she did Reiki on me, and she
Oh.
would connect you with your where you were like in your mother's womb at, a certain time, like at like maybe 7 months or something like that. And my mom had passed by that time, and I've connected with my mom spiritually in many, many ways. This way was so profound because
Wow.
we were like literally having an exchange of conversation. It was like, but it was present.
Hmm.
It was like, she was physically in the room, you know, and she's
Yeah.
saying this and I'm saying that. And it was so powerful there at the Open Mind Center.
Wow. See, that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yes.
Yeah.
I love and so now like I love exposing myself to just different philosophies or spiritualities, just different ways of life. And then I could decide what works for me and what doesn't.
Right.
Instead of, but before I wouldn't do that.
And
It was like I was afraid to. One, I didn't want to dishonor my father.
mhm.
And then two, I had like fear around God, that really dictated a lot of the things that I did. Oh, girl, I used to be hella judgmental. Like, because of like, oh, the Bible says this, you not living your life like, oh my gosh, I was terrible. And I had to get on the good foot to turn that around.
You must feel so free, and especially when you first, just shifted. That had to be
Yes.
so freeing.
Oh my gosh. If there was a word beyond free, absolutely. Because now that I feel so good and so aligned with my spirituality. And then you know what happens? Then I look for other ways to be deeper in my spirituality, but not feeling like it has to be a certain way. I used to feel like it had to feel a certain way and look a certain way. Now it's like, ooh, I think
Yeah.
I'll do this. Like, oh, I'm a like girl on like Sunday or Saturday mornings. Me and Joel Osteen, we be walking while he be talking, but before, like I actually used to listen to him a long time ago, or I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna open my Channy app and I'm gonna listen to this astrology meditation, or
Mhm.
oh, I'm gonna do this mudra while I'm doing this, or ooh, let me call my mom or let me call my girl and get a Reiki session. Like I
Yeah.
love that I have all these different options
Mhm.
and tools, and I just feel so alive. I feel so alive with my spirituality.
Wow. And when do you ever have a communication with your higher power where you feel, what he, she, it, they, is saying to you, like you're receiving the messages and the guidance?
I do. It's I would say it's interesting. It shows up differently than it did before. Now I really feel it in my body. It's almost like an excitement in my body where my complete body, not on fire in a bad way, but it's just like I just feel this surge of energy and then things are like downloaded.
Yeah.
And so then
Wow.
I have these, then I'm like, oh, I have these aha moments. You know what's interesting is I love that way that feels and I want to stay like that all the time, but then it just doesn't. So I'm like, okay, it's almost like getting high. I need
Yeah,
another
yeah, that's it's so something another guest told me the same thing. She says she feels like her body's on fire, like, in a good way,
one.
you know? Yeah, amazing,
But
amazing. So
I'm in constant communication. Like I feel like my gratitude is a piece of that. I journal a lot now with my morning pages that I'm learning from the artist way. Like I'm 8 weeks in, so that's helped me connect more too. Because like as I am, it's like as my thoughts are transferring the paper, I also feel like it is like God aligning with me when I'm doing that. And then
yeah.
another thing is when I see Romans 8:28 moments, when it's like this happens, this happens, this happens, and I see like, oh, I see you, and then how that comes together.
Mhm. I love that. So, what do you think is your superpower, your divine gift?
It's joy. Um, no, I think seriously though, I remember years ago I used to say like, God, I am a vessel for you to transmit love through me to the people. Like I would work out, and while I was working out, I would just like I didn't really like watching the news. And so instead of watching the news, because I would ask myself, well, if I don't watch the news, and how do I know what to pray for people that need it in the world? But the news was like really taxing. So then I was like,
Yes.
how about I just send healing to the world? Everything that I could think of as it related to healing and goodness. Like, so I would cycle and I would just send that out. Or like I would go run and I would ask people, what do you want me to pray for you today? And I
Mhm.
and I would just like run and like just, pray for people. So oh my gosh, now I just forgot what the question was.
What do you think your superpower or
Oh,
your
yeah,
gift is?
superpower. I was like, I got
Yeah.
off on a tangent. So
But
I
that sounds like a calling that you had at that time.
And
Like a
I've
superpower.
always felt that way. Like, Adrian, when you're talking about, even though I grew up with quotes and positivity, that it was just something innate, I feel like I was born with a couple of things. One is to naturally be optimistic. And then two, the gift of forgiveness. Now, over time, of course, through life, some of that has like worn me down. So then I had to like work on that. But like I feel like my gift is really seeing people, really helping people to be seen and heard and to know that they can create goodness in their life. I've always been that friend. I've always been that person. I remember like as a kid, my friends used to say, I would give them Abraham Lincoln speeches because I was always trying to uplift people and
Yeah.
like just speak goodness over them. Like me telling you the story about my little pocket Bible book. I just feel like that is my gift. I really listen to people. I'm a very, very good listener, and I just want to share goodness. That's why I hate like if I'm not feeling that way and that's not what comes from me.
Mhm.
I know I can't be
Yeah.
that. I know I'm obviously things are going to bother me, and I can't be
Yeah.
that way all the time, but I do. I just want everybody when they leave my presence just to feel like they've had a big old hug.
And I usually ask people, what do you think God calls you to do for yourself and others? And I feel like you've described that. You're what you just said, is that what you feel like you're called to do for others?
Absolutely. And for myself, like I said,
Mhm.
it is joy and understanding that joy is our birthright.
Yeah.
You think about like joy in the morning, like and just really living into that and saying
Mhm.
like there's hope. That India Irie song, I think we were talking about that on my podcast. Like there's hope. You don't have to pay to smile or to laugh, and thank God for that. Is I remind myself of the simple joys, right, to keep me going, and then I also get to do the same for people.
Yes. Yes. Well, is there a miracle or a blessing that you'd be willing to share that you experienced and you knew that, look, this didn't have anything to do with me or anything I could control. This was completely God or the universe or my higher power.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm like teary-eyed thinking about it, I thought about that when I read the question. And the first thing that came to mind was when I found my son's father after like 20 years. And so, like, after my son was born, like, just some things happened, and like, his dad basically like disappeared. Um, and so I tried to find him different ways. Like, I even like had a bounty hunter. Like, I did all these things.
Wow.
I popped up at like houses where he was supposed to live. I went through attorney general, just could never find him for all these years. So it was December of 2020, and something in my spirit was just like, go look on Facebook. Now, mind you, I'd looked on Facebook before, and I'm telling you all these other ways that I've tried to find him. And it didn't take long, and I see this guy, and I see his name, and he doesn't look the same. I mean, it's been over 20 years, right? And so I started going through his pictures, and I was like, I wonder if that could be him. And then he had a picture with his older son, and I was like, that's about the age that he would be. So I sent him a message. And I said, "Hey, is your name such and such? And do you have?" I said, "No." I said, "Is your mom's name this? And do you have a son that's named this?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he was like, and I didn't respond right away because I didn't see it. And so a couple hours later, he was like, "Oh, oh my gosh, is this you?" Right? And he was like, "Is your son my son?" And so we got on a call, we talked, and I told him, I was like, look, we could do a paternity test. I was like, because we didn't, because like I said, he disappeared when he was really young. I said,
Mhm.
because I don't want there to be any questions. So we did that or whatever. But the miracle is all these years, I didn't find him, right? I go on Facebook. It takes a few minutes. This was in December, and he died that February.
Wow.
And the reason why, for me, that was such a miracle and a blessing is because I don't know. Oh, it's gonna make me cry. I don't know how I would have connected to his older son.
Mhm.
And I love him so much. And I love seeing how close he and Jamaica are. And if their dad and I hadn't reconnected, because Jamaica always knew he had a brother, but his brother didn't know
Mhm.
about Jamaica. And so if I hadn't connected with him, I'm the one that communicated to everyone that he had passed, because it was so weird. Some person that didn't even really know me sent me a message and was like, "Hey, he was in a car accident. Here's a person who told me." And so like I'm doing all this research, and I called the city morgue to confirm like his death. And so anyway, like all of this, like I was the one that was able to give his son all this information. I was able to give his ex-wife like all this information, and his uncle. And if he and I wouldn't have connected, if I wouldn't have found him on Facebook,
Yeah.
then we wouldn't able to close that loop. And these brothers, I don't know how they would have connected.
Wow. That's amazing. Did Jamaica get to meet him?
Not as an adult. Mm-mm. The
Mhm.
last time he saw him, I guess he was, like, maybe a year old or maybe even
Yeah,
a little less.
that
Yeah. So that
yeah.
was the only thing, of course, that was, sad, was he didn't get to have that connection. Um, but and I'm really thankful that I got to reunite with
Yes.
him to then have the brother. And now, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
every time I see them, oh my gosh, I love
Oh.
it so much, because I remember when Jamaica's brother was a baby, and I looked at him, Adrian, his big, cute little button eyes, and I said, he is destined for greatness if he has the right exposure. There was just something in him. And I said,
Mhm.
I hope I get to be a part of his life. And so here we are, fast forward 23 years later,
Yeah.
and he's staying with me right now,
Is
and
he really? And how
mhm.
old is Jamaica now?
So Jamaica's 24 and his brother's 26.
Wow, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so
And they're
it's so
beautiful.
beautiful. It's such a wild, there's so much more to that story, but it's such a
Yeah.
wild story, and I'm just so
Mhm.
thankful. So, when I said the Romans 8:28, that was
Mhm.
all God. Like,
Yeah.
all God right there, how all that was brought together from me finding him on Facebook to the guy that messaged me about the car accident because I was able to communicate to everybody
Yeah.
that
Yep.
happened, and even my
Yeah.
therapist I had at the time, she talked to me every day, Adrian, for a week. She didn't charge me because she asked me, Genia, do you have anybody you can talk to? And I was like, no, because nobody understands this. I didn't have hate for their dad at all. More,
Mhm.
he and I talked and I learned more about like where he was in his life, but I never did. Why? Because girl, he gave me something nobody else gave me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm so
Yes.
thankful.
Wow, that's so wonderful. And I mean, I feel that. I understand that. I have family friends, and I'm not going to tell their whole story, but they have
Right.
an uncle who passed, and it was a similar where he found out that he had a son. He didn't know he had a son. The son didn't know, about the
Mhm.
father. And the uncle passed, the father passed, but the son was there by his side. And it was just, it was
Mhm.
just all God, just
Yeah.
things that we just don't have a hand in, you know, just huge blessings.
And look, we could go on for hours. I got so many stories about how
Yes.
God has shown up.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, so please tell people how to get in touch with you, with your podcast on social media. If they want to connect with you directly, how can they
Yes,
do
absolutely. Everything create a magical day.
that?
So there's the website that has like, all the resources and information you can access. The podcast, like everything is there. There's all of the platforms for podcasts. So like Apple, Spotify, wherever else you can access the podcast there. We're finally on YouTube. My first year, I was too scared to show up on video. So this is our first season. I think we're like maybe episode 8 or 9 in. So we just launched. I'm so excited about that. And then like personally, I'm on social media as Joyful Genia. So like on TikTok and then Instagram. And that's where I try to like show a little bit more of my life. On Create a Magical Day, you'll see like fun tips and graphics, and you'll see some videos from me. So just kind of mixing it up, giving you options to access joy.
Yeah. And this is the second incarnation of Create a Magical Day. So if you have 8 episodes on YouTube, I mean, you did a slew of episodes before.
Oh, yeah, and that's what can be found on, the other platforms, like season 1, I think, has, like, 45 episodes.
Mhm.
Maybe eventually I'll put them all, like, audio on YouTube if people wanna, like, because I know some people like to listen on YouTube, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because
And
yes, because you were on season 1 and 2. That's
that's
coming.
true. And you know what? When I was on, because we were just coming out of the pandemic, trying to anyway. And
Mhm.
I remember that day, and you were like, what brings me joy? And what was bringing me joy was this Ella Fitzgerald song with this big band. And it was just like I would dance, when the song would come on, I would go, get it from YouTube. And so I did like a video of myself, of like dancing and everything. And so I thought, I might put this was at the time. I was like, I might put this up on YouTube. And that day that I podcasted you was the first day I went back to the gym, so I didn't do
Oh.
any exercise or anything. And so I came across that video not too long ago, and I was like, nah, I'm not putting this up on on any social media. I'm not doing it. It just looked
That's
too
so
crazy.
funny.
But
That's too funny.
yeah, but I'm just so grateful for you being on, and you're just
Thank
gonna have to
you.
come back sometime because there may be more to talk about.
Oh, man. Well, when you and I chat, we be chatting,
Yes,
so
yes, yes. Yep. There's all kinds of directions we can go in. So
absolutely.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much. This has been so wonderful. I loved all the questions that you asked. The reason why I like the different questions is it allows me to reflect on where I've been, where I am, and then thinking about like where I want to continue to go. So I really appreciate them.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate you with the word of the day. Your word of the day today was expressive, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
wanted to show up and be expressive in anything and everything I did.
Yeah. You have so much for people to think about, when you talk. You are one more question, and I know the answer.
Okay.
But how do you see yourself as a healer or a seeker?
Ooh, that's a good question. I want to say both. And the reason why I say both is on the healing aspect. When you talk about like, you ask me my purpose, and I'm like, for joy, right? Spreading that hope. And then on the seeker side, I will be a learner until I die.
Yeah.
Like, I listen to podcasts and I read books, I read affirmations. I'm always asking questions. Like, I have a therapist and a manager coach. Like, if you give me something else, I'll take it. So that's why I say, like, I feel like I'm both.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you so much, Genia.
Thank you, Adrianne.